When Diddy got arrested by the Department of Homeland Security after a flood of progressively worse and worse lawsuits and accusations for almost a year straight, no one was surprised. If Diddy had ever been one thing, it was creepy. You didn't have to look very hard or even look at all to see that something was wrong in Diddy's mind. Inappropriate relationships with teenage Justin Bieber and Usher, the rumors around the mysterious deaths of Biggie and Tupac, an easily recognizable thirst for attention, and even worse things that I literally can't say in the first 5 minutes of a YouTube video. Basically, people had already known for years that Diddy wasn't the generous, conscientious music executive that he and his team tried so hard to make him look like.
So I had two choices. Either I was going to sit in that failure and give up, or I was going to make a decision to step out of the darkness. You see, when you're in that darkness, you want to sit there and wait for the light to come. The only way out is to step forward, to face your fears, to become your own light.
Behind the big donations to schools, the activism, there was always an undertone of evil that even $1 billion fortune couldn't cover up. You don't get your name associated with murder and stealing for no reason.
I'm a savage! Whatever I want, I'm going to get! Whatever I want, I have to get!
But it wasn't until his arrest and the ripping off of the mask that Diddy's true nature was finally revealed. He wasn't a good guy with a dark side or a nuanced figure with a complex past. At the exact moment when the federal government brought him in for sex trafficking charges, it was confirmed that Diddy was truly deeply evil. The evidence was right there. It was the final piece of the puzzle revealing that Diddy had spent his entire life taking advantage of others to the point where his music empire was nothing but a front for his sick obsessions. At the same time though, Diddy's arrest somehow created a lot more questions than it answered. We all knew he was a bad guy, don't get me wrong, but now we're realizing that it went so much deeper, with Diddy starting to look like his sick, disturbing crimes might rival those of Jeffrey Epstein or Harvey Weinstein. Not just one bad actor, but instead the leader of a criminal operation carrying out revolting abuse and exploitation. And so now, there are even more questions than there were before. How did Diddy get away with it for so long? What were the full extent of his crimes? But even more sinister, who knew about his empire of abuse and didn't tell? Who, out of his massive network of celebrity friends and powerful contacts, was joining in? The size and scope of Diddy's alleged crimes combined with his control over the industry implies a much larger web of deception and evil than most of us could have ever imagined before. It's to the point where somehow his arrest, finally putting a monster behind bars, opens more doors than it closed. So what and who was Diddy hiding? If you let Diddy tell the story of his own life, he's a hero. He spent massive amounts of resources and time throughout his career creating good optics for himself. Even as recently as 2021, one of the last magazine profiles that was ever done on him before his arrest tells us a lot about how Diddy wanted people to see him and what he thinks of himself. During that 2021 interview with Vanity Fair called With Love, Sean Combs, he talked about his new lifelong purpose that was literally sent to him by God. He says this:
I feel like God sent me. God put on my heart, what's your purpose? I was looking at all these things, preachers and different people talking about purpose, because I realized purpose is something deep. Have I really found my purpose? I know I'm making money and I'm successful and I'm changing the game, but is that my purpose? And then I really prayed on it, and God told me, your purpose is to play a part in saving the black race.
The man who spent his whole career signing his fellow black artists into record deals designed to make him rich off their work, the guy who lied on the names of almost a dozen black kids from his own hometown dying at a concert he was performing at, saying he had tried to save their lives and then leaving the scene immediately, the same guy who testified against Shine and let him go to prison for 10 years, ruining his life and career rather than tell the truth, the guy who groomed teenage Usher. The list is endless, and that's not even to mention the long-running rumors that he ordered the death of Biggie Smalls, his business partner and supposed best friend. That's the guy who's saying he is supposed to save the black race. The hypocrisy and self-awareness is almost unbelievable. Meanwhile, Diddy still says a lot of other highly suspect stuff in this article. At the time, he was embarking on a strange vanity project where he rebranded himself with the name Love, talking about progress and equality in a way that was pretty meaningless back then, but now is just disturbing knowing what he was getting away with behind the scenes. He said,
"The Me Too movement inspired me. It showed me that you can get maximum change." The journalist wrote, he launched a diversity training program this summer. The 6-week course is dubbed, in true Sean Combs fashion, the Excellence Program, and is designed to support aspiring entertainment executives from underrepresented communities.
But then, most ridiculously of all, he said,
I was sent here not to just do things that are rooted in personal success, but to be able to transfer to we, and do things that are a real change, bringing communal success to everybody.
As if he had ever done anything to anyone except traumatize, abuse, and exploit. Even before it all came out, though, people called Diddy out for his hypocrisy. Knowing that his history in business was anything but loving, it's pretty ridiculous to hear him tell people that he wants to save the black race. But now, knowing what we know today, the interview with Vanity Fair and many others he did at the time show how deep-rooted Diddy's evil is. The whole time he's preaching about how he's gonna save his race, benefit his community, give back to people, he was not only already exposed for doing dirty business against black people his whole career, but he was also abusing black women behind the scenes. Even as recently as just a few months before Cassie's bombshell lawsuit was filed against him, destroying Diddy's image forever, he received a Global Icon Award for the Video Music Awards, and then, shortly after, was given the key to New York City by Eric Adams. And he went to great lengths to curate this good image. For many people, Diddy was this guy who opened schools, founded charities, and represented success against all odds. True black excellence. But even that was a facade. In 2016, he founded a charter school in Harlem, New York, making a big deal out of the PR and congratulating himself for being so charitable, promising better opportunities for underprivileged kids growing up in a similar situation as him. Although, later, parents of students at the school reported that it was mismanaged and underfunded, being plagued by high teacher turnover and student violence. But with Diddy, the way that he continued to seek out this attention and curate this image of an inspirational, generous, caring black billionaire, it reveals a lot about him. Any sane person who exploited his colleagues, putting them in bad deals, leaving people for dead, testifying against his clients, and was even rumored to have put a hit out on his supposed best friend, not to mention grooming kids, most people, if optics were looking that bad, would go into hiding. But with Diddy, his lack of self-awareness, his narcissism, it made him keep coming back for more attention, and ultimately I think him still blowing his own trumpet while public opinion started to shift played a big hand in his eventual downfall. The motivational speeches, the PR campaigns, the videos of the yachts on the Amalfi Coast, if he didn't spend so much money and time flaunting, the story around him right now might not even be half as big. Because still, the world always knew. And now that he's sitting in a federal jail awaiting a trial that sees him facing a sentence of anywhere from 15 years to life, despite his best efforts to create a narrative that he controls, it just never really worked in his favor. I mean, let's look at the ridiculous stuff that he had written about himself in his biography.
Sean Combs was only 2 years old when he realized his life's passion. His mother had dressed him up for a fashion show at his daycare center, and as the little boy toddled out, the light hit him and the audience cooed at his adorable entrance. Combs later said, "As soon as the spotlight hit me, I embraced it." He says, "I came out and tried to steal the show," and what he accomplished with cuteness at 2 has repeated over the years with hard work and determination. Enormously talented and regularly controversial, Sean Combs has created an empire in film, fashion, and fragrance, changing the face of hip-hop forever. At age 2, Combs knew what he wanted from life, and since that first spotlight, he's been stealing the show ever since.
This type of ridiculous narrative shows just how dumb Diddy is. Despite his success and money, he couldn't manage to keep a low profile enough to get away with his insane crimes against humanity. And rumors about Diddy's true nature had been circulating for decades. The joke that you had to have sex with Diddy if you wanted a record deal in the rap game was an old reliable punchline, to the point where I doubt most people saying it even knew what they were referencing. But it always seemed like it really might not be a joke, with even big figures in music like Eminem, 50 Cent, Cat Williams, and Kanye speaking publicly on their dislike for Diddy. Not to mention that even without the rumors, Diddy's business career was shady at best, with the fact of him exploiting his artists being public knowledge. Not just a rumor, but something literally everyone knew. The fact that he seemed to love fame and attention so much, always on a talk show, always doing some interview, or popping up to receive an award, it made him seem even more sinister. Being a shady businessman is one thing, but most people do that in private. Trying to draw as much attention to yourself as possible, as if you're congratulating yourself for getting away with it, it's safe to say that Diddy didn't exactly have fans. Instead, he had power and influence, and he was able to leverage that into as much attention as possible. And I think most people could tell the difference. And now, with Diddy suddenly sitting in federal jail facing 15 years to life, the secret is out. He was much, much worse than just a shady or unethical businessman. In reality, his exploitative business tactics were a cover-up for something much, much worse. All of those rumors were true, and more. And if you're trying to see what was going on behind the scenes all along, one of the first places you need to look is the women in his life. One of the biggest sources of clues throughout Diddy's life and career was his romantic relationships. And that makes sense. The long list of women he's been connected to are some of the people he spent the most time with. They should know him best. So when it comes out that he's been hiding his true character all along, that's where people are gonna look first. Diddy had a relationship with the model Kim Porter from 1994 to 2007, later dated singer Cassie Ventura from 2007 to 2018, and has also been romantically linked to Jennifer Lopez, Cameron Diaz, Young Miami, and many others. These women could play a key part in revealing the extent of Diddy's crimes, potentially providing a unique insight into what really happened behind closed doors, at least the ones who are still alive. Kim Porter might be the most notable woman in Diddy's life. She met Diddy while working as a receptionist at Uptown Records, his first record label, and they were together on and off for almost 15 years, having 3 kids. Diddy even adopted her first son, Quincy. Kim herself was a successful actress, appearing in a number of roles as well as modeling on numerous magazine covers. She also helped start singer Janelle Monáe's career while running a lifestyle planning company in Atlanta, Georgia. However, Kim's life was cut short in 2018 when she died from a sudden case of pneumonia at the age of 47. Diddy was devastated. I mean, the mother of his children, a very important person in his life, unexpectedly gone. He tweeted out countless reflections, saying things like,
For the last 3 days, I've been trying to wake up from this nightmare, but I haven't. I don't know what I'm going to do without you. I miss you so much.
And later,
we were more than best friends. We were more than soulmates. We were some other shit, and I still miss you so much.
The tributes to Kim, the toll it took on him, it was clear Diddy cared. At least that was until the conspiracies came out. You see, the circumstances surrounding Kim Porter's death were confusing, to put it lightly. Kim was only 47 years old, living in a beautiful upscale neighborhood of Los Angeles with access to healthcare, medication, and anything else she might need. How did she end up dying of pneumonia at home in under 4 days? How did she not get to the hospital first? It's a valid question to ask. Young, healthy, rich people don't randomly die out of nowhere with no warning. Allegedly, according to a number of rumors and tabloids over the years, Kim Porter's death may not have been as simple as the official explanation makes it seem. There are a couple of reasons why Diddy might want Kim out of sight and out of mind. Most convincingly of all, there's a rumor that she was writing a book revealing Diddy's true character and the abusive nature of their longtime relationship in the year leading up to her death. Knowing what we know now about how Diddy treats women, it's not unbelievable that his relationship with Kim Porter was similar to the one with Cassie later on. There are still even deeper theories that many people online have used to point out a possibly even more sinister story behind the curtain. Kim Porter's autopsy was left inconclusive for over 2 months, not confirming pneumonia until some time later when a new coroner was assigned to the case. There's also a discussion around how pneumonia, the sickness that killed her, can infamously be induced with ricin, a chemical poison that can be extracted from castor beans. None of this is fully confirmed on the record, but there's still a lot of noise around Kim Porter's death because it's understandably difficult to identify what parts of Diddy's possible involvement might hold water or be completely false. Trying to learn more about her relationship with Diddy is only made more difficult since the publishing of a completely false fan fiction memoir of Kim Porter that shot to bestseller status on Amazon in just a few days. It was almost immediately removed from the site though when it was discovered that this book was totally fictitious. Containing a number of ridiculous claims, it took a lot of the rumors about Diddy to an extreme level that seemed much more like fan fiction than actual reporting. Even more, the author Chris Todd had used an African-American pen name, Jamal Millwood, despite looking like this. All that is to say, the life and death of Kim Porter remains shrouded in mystery and speculation. While official reports attribute her untimely passing to pneumonia, the circumstances surrounding her death have fueled countless conspiracy theories. The rumors of a tell-all book being near completion just before she died, the unusual autopsy timeline, the unfortunate death of her coroner just a few weeks after the investigations against Diddy began. These whispers of foul play have cast a long shadow over Diddy's relationship with Kim. Whether these theories hold any truth, or they might just be online conspiracies, I can't tell you that. But the tragic loss of Kim Porter at the age of only 47, regardless of its cause, is just another strange chapter in Diddy's life that only goes to further support the charges against him. Still though, somehow, Diddy's relationship with Kim is just the tip of the iceberg. Jennifer Lopez is another person Diddy was romantically linked to for some time, and she is still around to tell the story today. Not that she seems very much like she wants to at all. Ever since the accusations against Diddy came out, reporters, paparazzi, and the general public have been taking a close look at her to see what her response might be, especially since she was notably present on the night of the shooting that ruined bad boy artist Shine's life, landing him in prison for 10 years for a crime that multiple witnesses and experts said he didn't commit, while Diddy testified against him regardless. At one one recent event, she abruptly left an autograph signing after being asked about the nature of her relationship with Diddy. Understandably, being asked to recall your relationship with an accused sexual predator isn't a pleasant situation to be forced into. She's previously described their time together as tempestuous and emotionally exhausting, with multiple sources citing that Diddy's cheating ended their relationship prematurely. However, her ex-husband has also claimed that she attended several controversial parties with Diddy while they were dating. Multiple times in recent months, Jennifer Lopez has done her absolute best to ignore and escape questioning about her connection to Diddy. But if you run away at the mention of his name, it sounds more and more like there's something you actively want to hide. But there was one woman brave enough to share exactly what she knew about Diddy. Suddenly, in November of 2023, Diddy's ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura, an accomplished model and singer with multiple Billboard hits, filed a 35-page lawsuit against him with a list of horrifying accusations, confirming almost everything people had ever said about Diddy and more at the same time. The lawsuit started with an almost morbidly funny preliminary statement that goes like this.
In 2022, Mr. Combs received the Lifetime Achievement Award at the BET Awards. During his acceptance speech, Mr. Combs stated, "I have to give a special shout out, thank you, to the people who were really there for me." He named a number of people before adding, "and also Cassie, for holding me down in the dark times." The truth, however, is that Cassie, Miss Cassandra Ventura, was instead held down by Mr. Combs.
But then it gets serious. The content of this lawsuit is disturbing, and the wording may be altered to avoid restrictions on the video. I'm not going to read it all, but it's important to hear some of it. Miss Ventura endured over a decade of Diddy's violent behavior and disturbed demands. For Miss Ventura, the dark times were those she spent trapped by Mr. Combs in a cycle of abuse, violence, and trafficking. Among other violent and unlawful acts, Mr. Combs assaulted Miss Ventura in her own home after she tried to leave him, often physically attacked her, resulting in bruises, bleeding, and more, blew up a man's car after he learned that he was romantically interested in Miss Ventura, forced Miss Ventura to engage with male sex workers while filming events, demanded that Miss Ventura carry a firearm in her purse just to make her uncomfortable, and introduced Miss Ventura to a lifestyle of excessive alcohol and substance abuse. Being over 35 pages long, the lawsuit is too much to read here, but there's some really disturbing stuff that sounds almost unbelievable to any reasonable person. In the process of describing how Diddy spent years gradually assuming complete control of Cassie's life and finances, there's a section about halfway through titled, "Mr. Combs Forces Miss Ventura into Sex Trafficking." Before I get started though, again, this stuff is terrible. It's not for sensitive ears. This section, while far too disturbing to be allowed in a YouTube video without them restricting it, details a pattern of alleged sexual abuse, coercion, and exploitation that Ventura claims she endured during her long relationship with Diddy. It depicts these events in graphic detail. Combs allegedly forced Ventura into sexual encounters with male sex workers, which he called freak-offs. These encounters reportedly involved drug use, took place in various hotels around the world, and occurred frequently. Ventura claims she was required to facilitate these encounters, including finding sex workers and performing with them. These encounters reportedly caused severe anxiety and physical illness for Ventura, as well as giving her severe reactions to the numerous drugs she was forced to intake. The lawsuit also mentions an incident where Combs allegedly dangled Ventura's friend over a hotel balcony. When this lawsuit was filed, it was like a bomb went off. Diddy has already been seen for years as a weird, strange figure in the music industry. But after this, he immediately went from being a creepy uncle to a straight-up monster doing the unthinkable. He couldn't lie or hide. And the rest of the lawsuit just gets worse and worse. The descriptions of what Diddy put Cassie through are graphic and disturbing, and I can't say them out loud on YouTube, let alone the fact that it feels disgusting to read the whole thing for yourself. It's 35 pages of terror. Diddy paid a $30 million settlement just one day after the lawsuit was filed. He put out a smug and repulsive statement saying that, "We have decided to resolve the matter amicably, wishing Cassie and her family all the best." Cassie got what she deserved, closure in the form of a ridiculous amount of money. But it didn't matter. The floodgates were open now, because Diddy's behavior quite clearly wasn't isolated. It most likely wasn't just one person. It seemed in all likelihood to be something he built his whole life around, a pathological obsession that he would go to any length to carry out. It had ruined Cassie's life, and it was about to be revealed in full. Over the next few months, many more lawsuits would be filed against Diddy. All of them accused Diddy of systematically having a lifestyle centered around doing horrible things to other people. One of the most disturbing lawsuits came from Rodney Lil Rod Jones, a Grammy-nominated producer who worked closely with Diddy for 14 months, producing 9 songs for his album Off the Grid. In a lawsuit he filed in February of 2024, he claimed to have evidence of the following: Meek Mill on Diddy's yacht consorting with underage individuals, Diddy giving laced drinks to underage individuals at his home, and Usher in Diddy's home consorting with underage individuals. There was also a long list of things Diddy did to abuse Rodney, throughout a long process of trying to convince him that he would make sure he would win Producer of the Year at the Grammys if he agreed to engage in homosexuality with him. In the lawsuit, it's written like this.
Throughout his time living with Mr. Combs, Mr. Jones was the victim of constant, unsolicited, unauthorized groping and touching of his body parts by Mr. Combs. These events took place in Los Angeles, New York, Florida, and the US Virgin Islands. In addition to the unsolicited and unauthorized touching, Mr. Jones was forced by Mr. Combs to work in Mr. Combs' bathroom as Mr. Combs walked around naked and showered in a clear glass enclosure. As a heterosexual Christian man, Mr. Jones was uncomfortable with Mr. Combs' advances and expressed his discomfort to Mr. Combs' chief of staff, who responded with, "You know, Sean will be Sean." The chief of staff also attempted to downplay Mr. Combs' groping of Mr. Jones as friendly horseplay, stating that those acts were his way of showing that he likes you.
There was a lot more. The lawsuit is 73 pages long. It even includes photographic evidence of Cuba Gooding Jr. forcing himself on Rodney Jones, something that he has a long and public history of doing. The suit also includes graphic details about Christina Coram, Diddy's long-running chief of staff, describing her as equivalent to Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's former assistant who was convicted of sex trafficking and is now serving 20 years in prison. The lawsuit says this about Christina Coram.
It was important to defendant Coram to have Mr. Combs' drug of choice immediately ready whenever he asks for it. Defendant Coram required all employees from the butler to the chef to the housekeepers to walk around with a pouch filled with cocaine, GHB, ecstasy, marijuana, and Tusi. Defendant Coram also ordered sex workers and prostitutes for Mr. Combs. She ordered and distributed ecstasy, cocaine, GHB, mushrooms, and more to Mr. Combs and his guests who were present on his rented yacht and in his homes in LA, New York City, and Miami. On multiple occasions, she forced Mr. Jones to carry Mr. Combs' drug pouch against his will.
Talking in an interview 6 months after the lawsuit was filed, Rodney Jones revealed that he was living in hiding, unable to find work in the music industry and afraid for his life. He said this, "He's a monster. He'll do whatever is necessary to get exactly what he wants. He doesn't take no for an answer." Diddy's lawyers immediately filed to dismiss the lawsuit from Rodney Jones, calling it a cash grab, but it was far too late. The court of public opinion had already decided that everything in it was believable enough to take it and run. Even with relatively minimal evidence, at least from an outside standpoint, people made up their minds that Diddy was indeed a monster. Months before the feds ever came to pick him up, his career was already over. You go to old Facebook posts about Christina Coram, not even a public figure before she got named, and hundreds of people are leaving comments calling for her to go to jail, calling her evil and disgusting. Diddy's own Ghislaine Maxwell. And again, this is before Diddy got arrested. Not long after Lil Rod, Dawn Richard filed her own lawsuit. As a member of the girl group Danity Kane, the first girl group in history to have their first 2 albums debut at #1, and a former client of Diddy's Bad Boy Records, she knew Diddy very well. She wrote a number of things about her business and personal relationship with Diddy, starting with an affirmation that she herself witnessed Diddy's abuse against Cassie on many occasions. Dawn herself, though, was also a victim of Diddy's abuse. All the way back when she met him in 2004 while competing on his MTV show Making the Band, she wrote that Diddy often forced her and her bandmates to rehearse for up to 48 hours straight without food or breaks, with him instilling a culture of fear in all of the women he worked with. She also wrote that as she continued to work with him after her band broke up, he would often force her to take meetings with him while he was in his underwear or grope her body parts during stylist fittings before concerts and videos. She also wrote about a specific instance in 2010 when he tried to punch her in the face after she asked him to stop verbally abusing her in professional environments. Some of the most disturbing lawsuits filed against Diddy, though, have a different set of victims of a very specific age group. There are also other lawsuits that contain a number of claims so horrible I can't read the details on YouTube without this video getting restricted or even taken down. But it does beg the question of whether or not some of these allegations are even real, or if people are just chasing a payout like Cassie Ventura deservedly received. Fraudulent lawsuits are common in Hollywood, but before you make up your mind, I recommend looking into Tony Busby, the lawyer who's representing most of Diddy's alleged victims, having already filed dozens of lawsuits against Diddy, claiming he will be filing at least 100 more. Some of the unnamed yet alleged accusers claim to have been under 18 at the time of their interactions with Diddy, with some as young as 10. And Tony Busby himself is a high-profile lawyer with a pretty bad reputation in his hometown of Houston, Texas, notably having previously served as a defense lawyer on the impeachment trial of a Texas politician who had previously been fined by the SEC for securities fraud and accused of political bribery and corruption. However, Tony Buzbee also prosecuted NFL player Deshaun Watson in a case that resulted in the settling of over 20 claims of sexual misconduct. It's difficult to make a call on whether or not Tony Buzbee seems like the type of lawyer to file any old claim in the hopes of making a quick buck. Over 120 lawsuits is a shocking amount, but no amount of evil is unbelievable when it comes to what we already know has been confirmed with pictures and video proof of Diddy's actions. Regardless though, it doesn't matter. No one watching this video has access to Diddy's personal messages, his archives, his texts, or any other inside information that could reveal the truth once and for all. But there is someone who does: the Department of Homeland Security. There were dozens of other lawsuits against Diddy that came out across 2024, and there are still more coming out regularly. The most important one of all, though, was the one that was titled The United States of America versus Sean Combs. The feds don't arrest you immediately. It took about 10 months from Cassie's lawsuit against Diddy until the day when they put him in cuffs in the lobby of a New York City hotel. The reason for this delay was simple: the feds never lose. On the website of the Pew Research Center, you can find statistics about federal criminal conviction rates. In 2022, fewer than 1% of federal criminal defendants were acquitted. That's only 290 people out of 71,000 being let off the hook. But an even more surprising number is that only 1.9% of cases in total went to trial at all. That's because the overwhelmingly common result of being indicted by the feds in 90% of cases is that you plead guilty. The feds are so thorough, so on top of their business, that almost no one ever gets let off. The reason why is because they only charge winning cases. Some of the more high-profile federal cases in history have been people like Charles Manson, the conviction of the Unabomber, people like El Chapo, or a long list of international terrorists. The United States government is not going to come after you unless they are very sure you did it. That's why 90% of people who get charged by them just plead guilty to avoid possibly even greater charges and punishment if they take it to trial. The federal government would not risk the hit to their reputation by even allowing the chance of falsely charging a high-profile celebrity. There is no way. It has not happened in the past. And the feds? They took their time with Diddy, because Diddy was still walking around as a free man for months after these lawsuits were coming out. It took over 10 months from the day Cassie filed her lawsuit and cratered Diddy's reputation forever, immediately causing the severance of his sponsor deals and the cancellation of any public appearances, to the day that he got arrested. Even though he was cooked immediately, at least in the public eye, he was still a free man. But real consequences weren't far behind. Because shortly after Cassie's lawsuit was fired, it seems like the federal government, specifically the Department of Homeland Security, an agency normally known for preventing terrorism and securing the national borders, started taking a pretty close look at Diddy. Just 4 months after Cassie's lawsuit and 1 month after Rodney Jones' lawsuit, the DHS showed up at Diddy's house to take a look around. In March, they raided his homes in Miami and LA, seizing over 95 electronic devices and reportedly also finding illegal ghost guns and ammo in his house. That same day, Diddy was stopped at an airport just moments before he was going to board his personal jet on a flight to the Caribbean island of Antigua. Whether or not he was trying to flee the US is unconfirmed, but either way, he was not allowed on his own plane and remained in the US. He then spent another 6 months essentially in hiding, knowing the feds were watching him closely and building a case against him. And it wasn't until 7 months after Cassie's lawsuit, when CNN released a disturbing video clip proving her accusations once and for all, that Diddy finally broke his silence. And so with any denial going out the window, he dropped a half-assed, ridiculous apology for what he had done, or at least the part he was caught on camera doing, with no acknowledgement of anything else at all. One of Cassie Ventura's attorneys responded with this:
Mr. Combs' most recent statement is more about himself than the many people he has hurt. When Cassie and multiple other women came forward, he denied everything and suggested that his victims were looking for a payday. The fact that he was only compelled to apologize once his repeated denials were proven false shows his pathetic desperation, and no one will be swayed by his disingenuous words.
Regardless though, the feds eventually came and got him after a couple more months of investigation. It was then that the wildest lawsuit of all was filed: the United States of America versus Sean Combs. There are 3 federal charges against Diddy. Count 1 is racketeering conspiracy. Count 2 is sex trafficking by force, and count 3 is transportation to engage in prostitution. It's very revealing of Diddy's true character to see how he reacted to the accusations against him, even before the federal lawsuit came out, because the position that he and everyone around him would take from then on was denial. Diddy himself denied everything. He had his team denying everything. He was still making statements proclaiming his innocence, and up to the last minute, he was disparaging his victims. A massive misplay in light of everything that was coming out, especially knowing that the feds were looking at it. Most sane people, innocent or not, if they had things like this coming out about them, would go into hiding. That's what Harvey Weinstein did. Before he was arrested, he said nothing. He completely left the public eye. Diddy, though, his lack of self-awareness was on a whole other level. Just a few weeks after Cassie's lawsuit came out, one anonymous woman accused Diddy of sexually assaulting her at his recording studio in the early 2000s, with the papers being filed by the same lawyer who represented Cassie with her lawsuit, with that lawyer also having represented accusers against several other powerful figures like Bill O'Reilly and Harvey Weinstein in the past. The exact details of this anonymous lawsuit are a bit too much to read on YouTube, but notably it includes photographic proof of the accuser's visit to Diddy's studio, with even some photographs of her sitting on his lap. Diddy's response, though, was a massive mistake, and it calls back again to the overconfidence and narcissism we discussed earlier. He said this in a public statement.
For the last couple of weeks, I have sat silently and watched people try to assassinate my character, destroy my reputation and my legacy. Sickening allegations have been made against me by individuals looking for a quick payday.
He also said,
"Let me be absolutely clear. I did not do any of the awful things being alleged. I will fight for my name, my family, and for the truth."
Knowing now that Diddy was being investigated by the federal government, and he was putting out statements of complete denial, trying to make other people look bad, knowing now that there was video proof about to be released of him abusing Cassie, the picture that this statement paints has guilty spelled out in red ink all over the paper. Even after the federal investigation that led to Diddy's arrest and charges, another absurd and smug side of the situation was his family's reaction. Diddy has 7 children, many of whom are adults, and ever since Diddy was arrested, denied bail, and had a trial date set, they're still coming out with statements on Instagram saying things like this.
"The past month has devastated our family. Many have judged both him and us based on accusations, conspiracy theories, and false narratives that have spiraled into absurdity on social media. We stand united, supporting you every step of the way. We hold on to the truth, knowing it will prevail, and nothing will break the strength of our family. We miss you and love you, Dad."
Again, this is after video proof was shown of Diddy brutally beating his girlfriend. Diddy's mother, Janice, even wrote a letter in support of him, and it's one of the most smug, disgusting things you can possibly read. In the letter, she completely excuses his actions and even uses bizarre guilt trip tactics to make his accusers look bad. She wrote things like this:
"I am devastated and profoundly saddened. This seems to be like a public lynching of my son before he has the opportunity to prove his innocence."
It's some of the most self-righteous, ridiculous writing I've ever read. Referring to Diddy being held accountable as a public lynching is insane and a horrible insult to the actual victims.
"Watching the world make jokes and laugh at my son's life crumbling before our eyes is something I'll never forget. It is truly agonizing to watch the world turn against my son so quickly and easily over lies, without ever affording him the opportunity to present his side. These lies thrown at him are motivated by those seeking a financial gain, not justice. This injustice has been unbearable for my family. My son is not the monster they painted him to be. I can only pray I am alive to see him speak his truth and be vindicated."
If that isn't a ridiculous response to your son getting arrested by the federal government for sexually abusing people, I don't know what is. Even Diddy's own Instagram account has these strangely smug posts celebrating his youngest daughter's 2nd birthday. It's not really something that would stick out if he wasn't in jail for trafficking people, but knowing what we know, it's almost creepy and weird to see him and his team pretending everything's okay when the entire world knows the truth. Diddy already denied everything he did to Cassie and then ended up admitting it once the proof came out. So how could anyone believe what he's saying outside of that? And it's almost easy to see his family gathering around him and talking about how the truth will prevail and say, hey, they know him best. Maybe there's some truth to what he's saying. But looking deeper, the real reason why Diddy's kids are standing by him might be because they aren't too different from him. His son Christian was recently named in a lawsuit against Diddy and himself for assaulting a woman in 2022, with an audio recording from the scene being included in the filing. That's not to say Diddy's kids are all involved in his crimes or anything like that, but with their father being an influential billionaire, they stand to lose a lot if he goes away and gain much more if he remains free. But there's one thing Diddy's team is right about: the fact that the case has become a media circus. That is, mostly on Diddy's side. With his kids and mother defending him despite the mountain of evidence, it's a terrible look. They're not alone though. Even Diddy's lawyer called the federal prosecutors racist and claimed that they were trying to bring down a successful black man with their charges, at the same time as he was making strange excuses for Diddy being in possession of massive amounts of baby oil, saying it was just how Diddy likes to shop at Costco, buying in bulk. It's almost like everyone involved on Diddy's side can't help themselves but to make outright ridiculous excuses that make no sense at all. I think it shouldn't be a surprise that Diddy's former legal team quit all the way back in June, realizing that the case mounting against them was a losing one that they wanted nothing to do with. And I think it should also be mentioned that Diddy's new lawyer was mentored earlier in his career by Harvey Weinstein's defense attorney. Not long ago, Diddy's lawyers filed a motion demanding that the names of his accusers be published to prevent fraudulent false accusations against him. And while maybe that makes sense hypothetically, in reality it turns out that there was a darker, evil side to that request as well. According to prosecutors from an article released just a day after he was arrested, he repeatedly contacted witnesses and victims in the months leading up to his arrest, even offering to pay a victim's rent if she would agree to publicly support him in return. Somehow, he still continued to be straight up evil even while facing jail for the rest of his life, his ego not letting him realize he should have gone into hiding and shut his mouth a long time ago. That particular victim had texted Diddy to tell him that Cassie's lawsuit was shockingly similar to her own experience with him, only to have him try to bribe her with money on a call that was recorded and is in the possession of prosecutors. From Rolling Stone, Combs' alleged witness tampering was a focal point of Southern District of New York prosecutors' argument that he should remain in federal custody as the high-profile case heads to trial. The former billionaire's long history of obstruction and violence demonstrates that the defendant simply cannot overcome the presumption that no condition or combination of conditions can ensure the safety of the community. His influence makes it difficult to ensure that witnesses can share their experiences and trust that the government can keep them safe, said attorney Emily Johnson, one of the prosecutors. In the months leading up to Combs' indictment, prosecutors claimed that Combs and his co-conspirators had constant contact with witnesses over several different methods, sometimes after the witnesses received subpoenas to testify in front of a grand jury. After the feds picked him up and brought him to jail in September, Diddy asked for bail 3 times, offering up a $50 million bond payment, yet he was denied each time by the judges on the case, with concerns of him being a flight risk and the past precedent of witness intimidation. He currently still sits in a cell at the Metropolitan Detention Center, a notoriously horrific facility. Other former inmates of note include R. Kelly, his cellmate Sam Bankman-Fried, and even Ghislaine Maxwell, a key figure in Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise, among many others. And that's where Diddy's story basically ends. Once a billionaire businessman, an executive and producer known around the world, one of the biggest figures in Hollywood, running one of the biggest 90s and 2000s hip-hop labels ever, helping create some of the largest artists of the time, and being one of the most influential people in entertainment, he now faces 3 counts that, if convicted for all of them, will result in a sentence of at least 15 years, with the possibility for life in prison. And there are still more accusations and evidence coming out on a regular basis. What I'm trying to say here is that Diddy's cards are on the table. The feds know what he did. They know what he's in for. I've said it once and I'll say it again. 90% of people who get indicted on federal charges just plead guilty immediately to avoid even worse punishment that might happen at a trial. Diddy making all these statements about his innocence, pleading not guilty, his family sticking by him, it means nothing when we've seen a pile of evidence from videos to texts to Diddy's own personal history of being involved with scamming artists out of their royalties, possibly being linked to people's mysterious deaths, and having inappropriate relationships with underage boys. Denying anything that Homeland Security accuses you of doing when the entire world has seen the evidence against you is only further proof that while Diddy might have been a savvy businessman or a clever entertainer, he's ultimately stupid. But that's just Diddy's story. And it might be a dramatic story for sure. Diddy goes from being a kid in Harlem, growing up without a dad, to a key player in the 90s hip-hop and R&B scenes, to a household name with more endorsements, connections, and money than one person could ever know what to do with, to even becoming the 3rd figure in hip-hop history to ever be a billionaire. For many people, Diddy was known as a guy who opened schools, founded charities, and represented success against all odds. He went to great lengths to give himself this good image, an inspiring image for the black community. But even that was a facade, as all he ever did behind closed doors was exploit and abuse other black people. Ultimately, his persona was a mask so full of holes that it's difficult to believe a human could even do what he did. Looking deep into the allegations against him, looking at his history, even looking at his music career where he did nothing but exploit others as much as he possibly could for over 30 years, the life and actions of Diddy alone are enough to make a horror movie out of. But still, somehow, the mystery isn't over. Even though he's behind bars, the book isn't closed yet, because the big hole in the plot is Diddy's network. It's very telling that when the law started to shine their light on Diddy, the silence that followed was deafening. The lack of response from his peers, his friends, it says 1,000 words. Because the one thing Diddy always was popular. He was friends with Oprah and Ellen. He was always on the late night shows. He was referenced in pop songs. He was in many photos with different politicians over the years, not to mention his longtime friendships with people like LeBron, Jay-Z, and countless other A-listers. When Diddy gets arrested and a life of abuse and crime is revealed, It throws every public relationship he ever had into question. And with no one coming to his defense, and dozens if not hundreds of other figures who have been known to associate with him going totally silent, it seems to point to something much, much bigger than one guy acting alone. And when you combine that long list of friends with the ever-increasing disturbing level of stories that just keep coming out about what happened behind the scenes at Diddy's parties, the implication gets pretty serious. It's very difficult to separate fact from fiction when it comes to the history of Diddy and his personal connections. Just because someone appears in a photo or a video at Diddy's house doesn't mean they can be implicated in a sex trafficking scandal. At the same time, though, there are a number of people who stick out above the hundreds of artists, politicians, actors, and socialites who have associated with Diddy over the years, to the point where most people seem to agree it doesn't make sense for them to not have known what was going on behind closed doors. Looking back at the beginning of Diddy's career, there's one name that comes up more than any others: Clive Davis. Clive Davis is a massively influential record producer and music executive from New York that has won 5 Grammy Awards and helped build the careers of many artists, including Whitney Houston, Aretha Franklin, Dionne Warwick, Sly and the Family Stone, Bruce Springsteen, Billy Joel, Pink Floyd, and countless others. Essentially, he did what Diddy did for the music industry, but in the 70s and the 80s. Despite having a huge influence on the sound of modern music, though, Clive Davis's own story is stained by a long history of corruption and abuse. The start of his career was marked by him getting fired when he used company funds to pay for his son's bar mitzvah. And although most discussions of his behavior behind the scenes are scrubbed from the internet, there are rumors about his personality that persist to this day. Specifically, the questionable circumstances that led to the founding of Diddy's Bad Boy Records, the home of Biggie Smalls, Maze, and more. You see, when Diddy got fired from his first music industry job after just a couple years of experience, it was Clive Davis that funded the beginning of Diddy's next project, giving Diddy a $50 million advance to get started on Bad Boy Records. That in itself wasn't a reason to be suspicious, but rumors have gone around for many years that Clive Davis was originally willing to give Diddy opportunities on the condition that they would have an intimate relationship similarly to what Diddy may have had with his artists, perpetuating the same type of behavior that Diddy himself would go on to use as a means of controlling others in the industry. Nothing has ever been confirmed, but Clive Davis's own character, including his appearance at a party while his artist Whitney Houston had just been discovered passed away in the same building, only asks more questions than it answers, painting a picture of a complex web of evil that goes much deeper than just Diddy himself. There are many other names that Diddy's been associated with when it comes to abusive artists like L.A. Reid or Andre Harrell, some of his early industry mentors, but it's probably hard to prove, and I doubt more information is coming out anytime soon, with many of these figures being elderly or passed away long ago. All of that is to say, Diddy certainly wasn't the first or the last person to exploit artists in one way or another. But of course, it doesn't stop there. The point of looking at Diddy's connections is to identify that while not everyone Diddy knows was necessarily engaging in the terrible things he was doing, it's difficult to imagine that these people don't know what Diddy was up to. And it seems far more likely that they were just conveniently looking the other way, at the very least. Although, many of the people around Diddy look at least a little suspicious of taking part in his evil ways. Meek Mill started vehemently denying that he had anything to do with Diddy at all after countless video clips of him and Diddy's strangely intimate interactions were publicized, painting a picture of a close relationship behind the scenes. Similarly, the Kardashian family were once close friends and supporters of Diddy, with a then 20-year-old Justin Bieber, where many of the attendees were completely naked. And that's just one example of the Kardashian family talking about Diddy the same way you would talk about having a favorite coworker.
So who was with you this weekend?
A bunch of my friends.
Diddy, Quincy, Justin Bieber,
So far, so
French
good.
Montana.
Well, this party, I think half the people there were butt naked.
Another strange connection is Diddy's relationship with Oprah Winfrey, the billionaire TV host known for her inspiring success story and empathetic personality. She not only attended many of Diddy's infamous parties, but was also known for a close relationship with Harvey Weinstein. There's an absurdity to the self-congratulatory short films where Diddy is standing with Jay-Z in the mirror talking about black excellence while they drink champagne, and meanwhile, Diddy is running a sex trafficking empire behind the scenes, and somehow no one has any idea he's a monster? With Diddy abusing so many people for so long, it's all but certain that there are many, many people in powerful places who knew exactly what he was really about and just said nothing. Right now, though, we don't know exactly who knows what or to what degree anyone was involved, at least not for sure, but the photographic evidence is damning, to say the least. With Diddy's trial beginning in May, it's almost certain that a lot more will be revealed over time, because Diddy wasn't a shadowy character that stayed out of the spotlight as much as possible. He was in the spotlight for so long that there are almost less people who didn't associate with him than there were people who stood by his side. But Diddy, who once stood at the top of the mountain, the king of the entertainment industry, controlling and influencing so many people with his face and brands all over the world, is now alone. Not just alone in his cell, but also alone in Hollywood. He's been abandoned by his former friends, with all of them scattering as quietly as they can to get away from his name. The list of celebrities coming out in support of Diddy is literally empty. It's 0 people. Not one person who he was previously seen with countless times has said a single word to defend him. Because the fact is that a lot of the entertainment industry, these people's careers are make or break based on public opinion. All of these people, if not perceived as relatable or people you could aspire to be, they stand to lose a lot of money. With their careers being based entirely on how much attention they get, there's a lot of incentive for them to look good. But is there any incentive for them to be good? Not really. It makes sense that a lot of the people who could have spoken out about Diddy wouldn't, at least from their perspective. Why would you risk your own connections, reputation, and income to speak out against someone around you who had immense power and connections and was willing to threaten people who he didn't like? Why would Oprah ever risk her multi-billion-dollar empire and her reputation as a generous, empathetic person for any reason? The same goes for Ellen, or Kim Kardashian, or LeBron, or Leonardo DiCaprio. You don't get to be where these people are without worshiping money. And when you worship money, there's nothing you'll put before it, not even speaking out against injustice and evil. In some ways, that makes it easier for a celebrity to get away with something horrible than for a random regular person. When everyone around you has a brand to protect and so much at stake, they'll never speak out against the person next to them and risk even the tiniest stain on their manufactured persona of perfection. It's totally possible that the list of people who took part in Diddy's abuse could be smaller than you think, but the list of people who knew about it and were perfectly okay to do nothing is probably a mile long. But in that way, does the difference between those two things even matter? Even more than just turning a blind eye, though, there are a lot of real reasons why crimes like Diddy's wouldn't get exposed, even if many people knew about it. Diddy is known to have threatened people with firearms, stalked people he didn't like as a form of intimidation, and even blew up Kid Cudi's Porsche when he got involved with Cassie during a break in their relationship. He went to great lengths to maintain a dangerous image to the people around him, and was even found to have ghost guns in his house, firearms with serial numbers scratched off that can be more easily used to commit crimes. Basically, many people around Diddy knew that he was willing to do whatever it would take to maintain control. He had no issue threatening or intimidating others, even as we've heard from far back in his music career in the early 90s. Still though, the silence from Diddy's friends is pretty deafening. It's hard not to start to make assumptions, because if you're associated with someone and they turn out to be a monster and you never knew about it, you would probably tell everybody that you had no idea what was going on. That's exactly the first thing anyone would say about a friend or a coworker or an acquaintance who turns out to be a terrible person. I had no idea. And Diddy had a lot of friends, but suddenly they're all silent. There's this kind of well-known theory in the aliens community called the Dark Forest hypothesis. In the Dark Forest hypothesis, it says that we aren't alone in the universe, but that there are many alien civilizations around us everywhere. It's just that they stay completely silent because they're advanced enough to realize there are many other civilizations who could destroy them instantly. This is obviously hypothetical, but I think it applies to the world of celebrity that Diddy thrived in. If he was the only one involved in the racketeering, the abuse, the trafficking, he would have people selling him up the river immediately. Celebrities love attention. It's their currency. The only reason why that wouldn't be happening is if someone, or maybe everyone, was afraid of what could be said about them if they opened their mouths. Looking at it that way, it makes a lot of sense that almost none of Diddy's peers have said anything about him at all. Tabloids are all over Diddy right now. You never know how real a source might be when it comes to random blogs or magazines, but when it comes to their commentary today, it kind of makes sense. One website wrote this: Diddy is still in total denial, and he actually expected all of his high-profile friends to stand up for him, especially his exes like Cameron Diaz and J-Lo. The source continued, he can't wrap his head around the fact that everyone's dropped him. They said there's a legitimate fear among a huge swath of people in Hollywood that he could seriously embarrass them if he decides to talk about what they shared with him back in the day. There are rumors that he's kept meticulous records and even video recordings of all the crazy stuff that went on his parties over the years, and it's only adding to everyone's panic. The word is, he's got enough dirt to hang half of Hollywood. Of course, these sources could be totally made up, but if it weren't, Wouldn't these celebrities, always so quick to speak out and get some attention, always wanting to make themselves look like heroes or get their name in the news, these people who thrive off of engagement, why are they quiet now? Why would they pass up an opportunity to make themselves look good or to speak out on an important topic? The only logical answer is because what it reflects back on them is either too difficult to talk about, maybe in the case of Justin Bieber or Usher, or because it says something about them as people too. Earlier in the video, I mentioned Diddy's ambition. I think it's clear for a lot of people who reach the point he did, that can be a double-edged sword. With ambition, you can go far. From the bottom of the ladder, growing up without two parents, in poverty, no opportunities around you, then becoming a billionaire, there's so much that could be done with that power and influence. The unfortunate truth is, though, for most people, not just Diddy, the kind of person who gets to that point of wealth, they don't have anything in their heart that stops them from going too far. Hypothetically, a fast car is useful. If you want to get home to visit a sick family member, going home faster allows you to get home sooner. But if you go too fast and don't pay attention, you might just end up running over 3 old ladies along the way. And so looking at it like that, Diddy's so-called ambition, his empire, it ultimately just became a cover-up for his narcissistic, abusive, psychopathic personality. He wants to be the best, he wants to be a billionaire, he wants to have whatever he wants. But what did he do with all of that energy? He did nothing but build a facade to cover up his pathological need to take advantage of people. I'll quote Cassie's lawyer's response to his apology video. They said, "Combs' most recent statement is more about himself than the people he hurt. The fact that he was only compelled to apologize once his repeated denials were proven false shows his pathetic desperation, and no one will be swayed by his disingenuous words." And that's just Diddy. Looking at the countless people around him who seemed like they were oblivious to his actions at the time, you're left with a chilling realization. There's almost no way Diddy was completely alone. From the Kardashians to Oprah, from Beyonce and Jay-Z to Meek Mill and Ellen DeGeneres, it's not just about one man's crimes. It's about an entire system that values image and wealth over morality and justice. And as we wait for Diddy's trial in May, you're left wondering, how deep does this rabbit hole go, and who else might be implicated in the web of secrets and lies? The fall of Diddy might just be the first domino in a much larger, more sinister picture, one that could shake the very foundations of Hollywood and the music industry as you know it. You can look back through thousands of photos and videos portraying Diddy as a fun guy, a party guy, an entertainer, and knowing what he was really doing to people behind the scenes, it casts a massive shadow over the entirety of Hollywood that he was allowed to do that by his peers in the first place. Diddy obviously isn't the only person like this, though. Bill Cosby, Jeffrey Epstein, Harvey Weinstein, so many others. It's only becoming more and more obvious that influence and power attracts a very specific type of person. In a world where public opinion decides who thrives and who gets forgotten, though, the amount of control Diddy had over the people around him more than likely led to a sort of standoff, where many, if not most people who knew exactly what his true character was, would rather have protected themselves than stand up. Not only is that in itself a horrible injustice, but it begs the question, what else is being kept under wraps? A lot of the contents in this video comes down to conjecture or clues, but with Diddy in prison until his trial in May, it seems like his prosecutors might know exactly what they're looking for. As of right now, though, it's hard to say that the underbelly of the entertainment industry isn't looking more sinister and evil than anyone ever thought was possible before.